Also show you how to create a project while we're here. So we're going to get started quickly here. Our last window shopping was the third Friday in January, and we did it on basic Quilt As You Go. A Quilt As You Go block that wraps to the front and creates a sashing. We're going to kind of move on to the next phase from there of creating your own Quilt As You Go blocks. So if you've never done a Quilt As You Go, you can watch that video to learn how to do the basics, because we're going to assume you know how to do that. Follow along today. We'll still show you some things, but when you get down to actually starting your project, that video gives you all of the how-tos for creating your initial blocks. So what we're going to be talking about today is taking a block and creating your own thing. This actually is 18-inch blocks. I've got 3 blocks across the top, 3 here, and 4 down. As you know, on Quilt As You Go, on this method, the back wraps around to create the sashing. So on this quilt, I didn't want to have a solid color sashing moving through the quilt, so I wanted it to look more like it was offset, and you had to kind of think about how it was put together. So I used a backing that was this giant paisley that was a combination of black and brown and tan. So it hides those sashing lines. What we're going to talk about today is how to create these pieced blocks within a square that become Quilt As You Go. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to do a quick review of some tools that we talked about last time, things that make Quilt As You Go handier and easier. Your square up rulers are really nice. They make it much easier to cut a square than if you're trying to cut from an oblong ruler. You can do it, but much easier to have a square up ruler. And those of you who have watched a few of my videos know this is my favorite square up ruler. It's the 20.5-inch square, and it works great for cutting really big blocks. So those are very, very handy. And then some smaller rulers. I like one that fits nicely in my hand. This is Cheryl's favorite. This is one of my favorites. This is a 2x18. This is a 3.5 by 12.5. They're nice for measuring right along the edge of a block without having to have a big bulky ruler. They're nice and easy for cutting those 1-inch borders all the way around your blocks. The other tool that I like is this little Seams Right, and this is a Nancy Zeman product, and it's got all different measurements. And it's really handy. It's got a 1-inch grid and corner here. Really nice when I'm measuring my block, and I'll show you that again in a few minutes. And then to baste our blocks together, 505 spray or Quilter's Select Free Fuse work great. Glue stick is handy in a lot of different instances. A good rotary cutter and mat. And I really like a serrated scissors. A serrated scissors has a fine ripple along its edge. It still cuts a perfectly straight seam, but what that does versus a straight scissors, or a straight edge scissors, you know how sometimes you go to cut and the fabric kind of slides out of your scissors? That happens with a smooth blade. If you have a blade that has a micro serrated edge, it actually holds and grabs the fabric. And when I trim something later, I'll show you what I mean by that. So those are some of the basic tools. And then, of course, the other tool that you have is your fabric. I'm going to show you a lot of different fat quarter bundles today. Everything that I'm showing you, the products that I talk about, as well as the fabrics, they're all on our website, sewingbasket.biz. If you pick the shopping category, you'll see along the left a variety of categories. The very first one will say window shopping and today's date. The fabrics that I talk about today are all in that category. They're elsewhere throughout the web store, but I had them all clumped together in one spot. The other category is Quilt As You Go, so you'll see a lot of the tools there. And as I just said that, I realized I might not have moved that category to the very top. It might be the very bottom one, might say February 19th window shopping, but you'll see that category and everything that I'm talking about today is going to be in there. So this is just a great blender bundle all different shades of purple. Can't ever go wrong with that. So we have these blender bundles in blue, in green, purple, all different shades. And we also have mixed bundles of fat quarters. Fat quarters work great for Quilt As You Go. Reason being is that fat quarter is 18 by 20 or 21. I can get an 18-inch square, which is a perfect size for the back of Quilt As You Go. My front square can be 16 inches, my back square can be 18. So out of a fat quarter, I can get one 18-inch square, and I still have a 4-inch by 18-inch width of fabric that I can use to put in other places in my quilt. So fat quarter bundles work terrific for Quilt As You Go. All right. So we did something a little bit different this time. Last time we did some live sewing at the sewing machine, and we have to move the camera. There's some different things. What I did this time is we pre-recorded how to make a simple create your own block. And that video is saved, and we're going to show it to you here on this live for just a minute or two. But what we're actually going to be doing is creating this block. Background, and then 3 pieces sewn together to create this. And now we're going to make Kathy play with the new software, and she's going to share our screen, and in a minute a video is going to turn up, and you're going to see me in the little box on the corner, and you're going to see the sewing video. And that should be running. The backing square is going to end up being 1 inch bigger all the way around. You'll notice that mine's a little bit bigger than that. I've found that when I'm creating my own blocks, I have better success and a much smoother sashing if I trim the sashing down later. So I actually cut this about 1.5 inches or so larger all the way around. You can see it's not perfect. We're going to trim this later. No sound. But this piece of batting is exactly my 10-inch square.
Now they hear it.
So I'm going to take that square.
All right.
And I'm laying it on my pressing mat. And I want to be sure I have at least 1 inch all the way around. And then I took some pieces. These are just scrap fabrics. And I trimmed these a little bit. When I'm working, I'm normally dealing with big pieces, and I'm just kind of grabbing what I like. I like this little bird. I'm going to put him in here. And you'll notice this is some scrap along the edge. I'm going to cover that up so it doesn't matter. I could trim it off if it makes you happy, but it really doesn't matter. I'm going to line this bird up right with the edge of my batting, and I'm going to fuse it into place. And this is the start of my quilt block. And it's going to, and I'm not going to press it hard enough. If I keep holding it, it'll actually fuse to the back as well. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to just work with the front. So here's my piece. And actually, no, I'm going to flip it over, sorry. And I'm going to fuse the back in place lightly as well. I want that held on because my construction stitching is also going to be some of my quilting. Okay? And I'm just pressing this. When I'm moving my iron from place to place, I'm not pushing and sliding and creating wrinkles. I'm pressing, picking it up, moving it to another spot. So here I have my backing, at least 1 inch all the way around, my bird pressed here. The next thing I'm going to do is I would measure that space just approximately, about 4 inches by about 10 inches. And I will take a scrap of fabric. Again, this isn't cut to size. And I can put this down right along this edge. And what I'm going to do is stitch here, and then this is going to flip back. So that's going to be my second piece. I want to be sure that I cover this. And so I'm going to just line those two up. And I'm going to go to my sewing machine, And I'm using the edge of my foot, which is a little bit wider than 1/4 inch. And I'm going to do just a small lock stitch. And I'm going to stitch right along that edge. And I'm going to go down to the end of my fabric. I don't have to go all the way to the edge. And I'm going to just lock here and cut. And now I'm going to flip this piece back. And that's covering my batting. So I'm going to go to my iron. I'm going to give this a good press. And what this is now doing is fusing this polka dot to my batting. And now I can just take my scissors. Sorry, I should have had that with me. Thank you, Kathy. And all I'm going to do is just cut off this little bit of excess. Nothing magic to it, doesn't need to be perfect. The only time I have to worry about having that little bit of overhang is if I happen to be using a really light colored fabric. For instance, if this next piece I was going to put in was going to be white, I would see this polka dot through here. So I would have to use my ruler and cut that really straight. But that's the only time I need to worry about it. My next piece, and my goal here again, is to do nothing but cover that batting and have no unfinished seams. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to put it across the bottom here. And I do that by right sides together. Just line that up. This piece I had cut a straight edge. So even though this isn't straight, this piece is, and this bottom was straight. So I know I've got a pretty nice straight even line here. And just back to the sewing machine, I'm coming to the edge of my batting. Put my foot down. Again, do a little lock stitch. And stitch across. Keep that nice and straight there. This is really a forgiving process. Again, I'm going to stop by the edge of that batting, do a little lock stitch, and cut. And then this is going to come back and fold back this way. And I'm going to press that. Okay. My batting is now completely covered. You can see, oh shoot, I've got a tiny little bit showing. You don't have to worry about that because remember, your back is going to roll to the front and it's going to cover almost a full 1/2 inch. So I don't have to be all the way to the edge, just close. Here I can see a little bit of the shadow of this underneath where I talked about having a light fabric. If I don't have the sewing machine light behind it, I don't see it. But with the sewing machine light behind it, you can see that shadow. If I had that, I can just peel this back, excuse me, take my scissors, and I can just trim out that seam allowance. Be careful not to cut through your batting. And that'll just get that out of the way. Now I don't have that shadowing, and I can go back and give this a really good press. All right? And now I'm ready to go. I can take my scissors, and all I'm doing is trimming these pieces off with the edge of my batting. I'm going to go around my block here. I'm fine. This side, I need to trim a little bit. And again, I'm going to go just right to my batting. And this makes people nervous. It doesn't have to be perfect because, again, that whole edge of batting is going to be covered. What I want to be sure is that I don't snip the backing. So I'm going to just take this forward. And I know some of you are thinking, you could just go to your cutting mat. lay it down this way, peel this back, and use your rotary cutter? Yes, you can, but I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and this slipped, and I cut a slash into my backing. So it's a little bit more forgiving if you do a scissors. And so now my block is ready to go. I'm going to go back and just press this so it's really nice and flat, and everything is fused to my batting. And now I can go in and do whatever quilting I want to do. And depending on what batting you're using, that's going to tell you how far apart you have to quilt. Most batting is a good quality batting. You can go 8 or 10 or more inches apart. This one does not say on the wrapper. It doesn't tell me how far I can quilt apart. So to be on the safe side, I don't want to go more than about 4 inches. So I could go in and say, I'm going to just make something up. I'm going to do a little lock stitch here, and I'm going to just quilt down a ways. And you could, if you wanted to, get out a ruler and, put down, Elaine, and measure everything. But I'm going to just do a couple little zigzags here. Again, a little lock here, cut, and then I could come back and do a couple more lines. That's really crooked, but you can do whatever you want. And I don't want to take a lot of time sewing this, but I just want to show you that you want to do some quilting in here. Go a little bit. And remember, you don't have to go too close to the edge because that 1/2 inch is going to wrap from back to front. Again, just a little lock stitch here and a cut. So that area is quilted, albeit poorly, but that serves the purpose. And then I might come back and choose to do a decorative stitch. I'm not changing my thread. If I did this, I would use a thread that matched my coral color, and I would just maybe stitch right across the top of those X's in that area, and if my thread is matching, it is blending in, so you won't see it like this beige that I just stitched. And then if I wanted to, I could come in here, go around the bird, however much quilting I want to do. And that quilting is holding my batting in place. Also, this construction line and this construction line, we sewed all the way through, so we already had some quilting in place. And then if you've got an auto cutter, you want to go back and just snip off your little threads. Now I'm ready to go. My block top is finished. I've created my own thing. I can go on and, for instance, on this fabric, these were all different. This was a printed panel with all different birds and pieces. I could cut out any of these pieces and continue to create more blocks. When I'm ready for construction, I'm going to go back, I'm going to go to my cutting mat, and I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to trim off these edges to 1 inch. All the way around, 1 inch on all 4 sides. And then my block is ready to be sewn into my project, just like the Quilt As You Go introduction video and pattern that we've showed previously. So that's all there is to creating your own block. Hope you enjoyed it. So here I am. Hopefully that worked. We are delayed by about a minute or so. I'm hoping I'm not talking over the end of that video. But this is the block that we just did. Kathy, you want to scoot up just a hair? My head is kind of off. There we go. So this is the block that we just made. Again, polka dot on the back, the bird piece is on the front. This piece is just like one of these blocks. So this would be one of my squares. Obviously this one was bigger. This was an 18-inch square with a 20-inch back. So I can create any size that I want. This that quick video, not so quick, I guess 10-15 minutes, showed you how to make this block. You can do anything you want with these blocks. I'm going to show you a couple more things on playing with these as we go along here. So the miniature block that I just did, well, miniature, this was a 10-inch block. I did, and I held this up when I was by the sewing machine, but this is a beautiful new line that we just got in, and it's got all different things on it. I can cut these out and put these into my block in any way that I want to. And so when I started getting ready for today, I picked some pixie dots for the back and cut my batting. This block I was doing 16 inches square. So this is a 16-inch square of batting. And I cut my backing a little bit large. I don't cut it right to an 18-inch and line it all up. I give myself a little bit of what I like to call slop factor. And then I'll fuse this in place. When I'm done with all my quilting, sometimes the edges pull in a little bit depending on how much quilting you do, and it makes your outer edge wobbly. So if I leave myself a little extra and I trim this down to 1 inch after I'm done quilting, then my borders and my sashings come out nice and straight. So like this block, I trimmed down to a 1-inch border after I completed sewing it. And I mentioned that little Nancy's Notion seam guide. This little part is an inch. It's really a nice way to measure. Or if I'm putting my block on here, I don't have to lay my whole big ruler up. I can just use this little guide and know that I have at least 1 inch all the way around. I'm going to fuse my back down, and then I can just start to play. I grabbed that panel and I cut out these kind of 3 birds and this little piece. I thought, oh, that'll be cute at the top of a block. And that'll be that. And then I've got all of these fat quarters, and again, this is a fat quarter bundle that we have on the website. We've got all different fabrics, little butterflies on this one, and flowers, and birds, and stripes. All of these pieces could then be added onto my block. So I can create whatever I want from all different fabrics. So as I look at these blocks, it's a little easier to see back here. This block, this is my sashing. I had an applique block. I put some rounded corners on it. Then I added a frame. And then this is a chunk of fabric, a square of fabric, and another chunk of fabric. All I'm doing is covering that piece of batting, edge to edge. And then my edges are going to roll, and that's going to create my block. So here again, I had a square, added a border, put these 4 pieces in. So they're all a little different. Here, I added a wider piece. I had 2 strips sewn together here, and an applique up there. They're all a little bit different. You can create whatever you want. So I am going to go through a couple samples here of just ideas and get you comfortable with creating your own thing. So here I had some baseball fabric. I have started with a navy blue fat quarter, and I have my 16-inch piece of batting, and I'm going to fuse my batting, and then I'm going to trim off this excess. I've got, again, 3 or 4 inches here. This is going to be a scrap that I can use elsewhere later. But now I'm going to create onto this piece. And Kathy, if you maybe flip down, I think it's going to be a, oh, actually, I think if I do this, this will work. It'll give me a nice flat surface you'll be able to see. So what I did is I had some scrap brewer fabric, just a little bit. So I cut out just a square. And I thought, oh, that'll work in my corner. And then I had some other strips and pieces. And what I did is I took just a big chunk of this. This is a about a 12-inch square. And I'm just deciding what I want to do here. These don't all have to be perfectly cut, but I'm going to do this. And then I had some baseball fabric, and that might go there. And then I'm going to put my other piece along the top maybe. Okay, that's not a bad look. I could also say, well, what if I wanted this in the middle? I could add this piece down here and another piece to the top. But what I have to think about is how I'm constructing my block. If I want this piece in the middle, I need to sew it in the middle. Cut this piece and sew here. So this is one long strip, so I have a seam to add. And on here, I would lay this piece down. Then I'm going to take this piece as a straight edge. This other edge was my scrap. It's not even straight, but I have a straight edge here. I'm going to lay that right across here. I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to flip that up, okay? Trimming off this end. And then I'm going to, if I decide I want this in the corner, I'm going to take this piece, again, straight edge and straight edge. I'm going to sew this piece here, so this is attached. And then this piece will go right sides together. I'm going to sew this edge, and then it'll flip back. So what I'm worried about is covering my raw edges. But it's a simple process. You can just grab pieces. If you want to put things together, I could take, say, leftover strips that I have. This is just a 2.5-inch strip. I could take my baseballs, sew these two together, and then I could put these two strips into this place. So I can do anything I want to create onto that space. And when you look at a quilt like this and say, oh, I want to make a quilt for, my husband, my niece, whoever loves baseball, I can use all of these fabrics, or I can tie in other things. I can pull in pieces of T-shirts. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I can pull in scrap, maybe their old baseball uniform, all different things. I can also decide what my theme is and add other fabrics to it. So for instance, if I decided I wanted to make, I had somebody who liked Wisconsin Badgers. I can use Wisconsin Badger T-shirts, or this is a 6-pack bundle of Badger fabric, some music notes because you can't have the Badgers without the band, W's, a coordinate, some Bucky fabric and license plates, and then Wisconsin Badgers. So that 6-pack gives me 1.5 yards of fabric, and again, those pieces are big enough that if I wanted a whole block to be this Bucky fabric, I could do that. I've got a big enough piece that I can make my whole block from this, or it's also a big enough piece for the back. So Badgers would be another theme. I might have somebody who really likes cars, and what I tried to do here is pull some theme fabrics so you could get a feel for some of the new things in the shop. This is cars and license plates and a blender of red. That's spark plugs and a black. And then this one is an all-over car print. That's kind of a Route 66. And all different fabrics that coordinate nicely. Another one that's popular, especially if you tie in T-shirts, the motorcycle fabric works great with Harley T-shirts or obviously any other brand. But motorcycles, again, we put in the spark plug. This is all words, born to ride, throttle, rally, all different things. Tire tracks, again, a red motorcycle print, and skulls and wings. The motorcycle print, it is a generic, Harley doesn't make fabric, but it's just a nice print with motorcycles, born to ride, different things on it. So those types of fabrics make doing a quilt like this really fun. You can pick your fabric, you can put it wherever you want, and create your own blocks. Another theme that works great is patriotic. This one is just beautiful. It has the eagles and the flags. Just really a pretty fabric. And then we paired that with some other patriotics, a flag and a stripe and some swirled stars, and then red and blue stars. So what a nice gift for a veteran or somebody who's patriotic, or anybody whose team colors are red, white, and blue. That works out great. Excuse me. So that gives you the idea of how you can make designs yourself and create your own quilts. I'm going to show you just a couple more fabrics for fun. Couple ladies fabrics here, just a really pretty new floral. Just a real pretty one. And then there are some coordinates with that, a green and a pink. That one's hard to see. There we go. Thank you, Kathy. A little bit of a close print, and then a blue and another print. So those are just some really nice, these would make just beautiful quilts. Remember, this process is really nice for baby quilts too. You can do smaller blocks or fewer blocks. This sweet farm animal print just came in. And then we paired it with some of the cocoa, which is a plaid look. And in a green and a coordinated stripe. And then also the orange and the teal. Work with it. So this is a fun process. It's really a quick way to put a baby quilt together. Another one, you sometimes have trouble with finding something for those tweens. This is sort of a cosmic look. And then we paired it with starlet in a few different colors. And then the shooting stars, the blue, the purple, and the orange are really a fun combination. So I'm going to talk for a minute about putting in, I've talked about putting in kind of chunks of fabric. Well, what if you have stray quilt blocks and you have some extra pieces, little applique blocks or some pieced blocks that you have left over that you'd like to use? You can use these in Quilt As You Go. The one thing that you have to excuse me, be real careful about is remember that this outer edge is going to roll over 1/2 inch. And what that means is if you have a block that has a 1/4 inch seam allowance and you roll that edge, you're going to chop off all of your points. So if you want to use blocks like this, you can either take these, you can add some borders around them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or when you go to lay them out, you want to be real careful. I'm going to just flip this up again and pay attention to where that, I'm going to grab this one, it's a little easier to see, where that 1/4 inch seam allowance is going to be. If I put this right at the edge of my batting and I roll this inch seam allowance over, it's going to cut off all my points. If I take this block and I move it in a 1/4 inch, I use my handy little ruler here, and I move it in just a 1/4 inch all the way around, then when my edges roll, it'll hit right at the points and it won't chop off the points on your project. So if you are putting in blocks that have 1/4 inch seams on them like these, you have to worry about that. If you have blocks that don't have a 1/4 inch seam, this little bird I could put in anywhere because the seam allowance doesn't matter. So I could take multiple blocks like this and put them in here, and I could just sew, I could take these 2 blocks and sew a little sashing piece in here and one at each end and actually create a block this big and just put it in here and sew it together like Quilt As You Go. So you can do whatever you like. I could set one in here right in the middle and put it on point. And then I could take, well, we'll take this baseball fabric. Won't that be beautiful? I can take that piece, and that one's not going to be long enough. We'll take this baseball one, and I can lay this right across here, and that'll put this piece on. Then I'm going to chop this off, and then I can add another block, right sides together, and flip. So you keep flipping and turning to fill this space with no raw edges. Okay, I hope that makes sense. You saw the video at the sewing machine on construction. I'm going to show you a few more fabrics, and then we're going to get to talking about patterns for a minute. This is a new calla lily that just came in with, again, we put some cocoa with it and blenders, and gets all those bright fabrics really nice with that calla lily print. I'll open it up so you can see the whole piece. Just a really pretty floral print. And some new batiks came in. This is one of the sets, a ginkgo leaf, and then a blue ginkgo, a really pretty blue floral, and then a blender with the blues and browns, and then two other coordinates that work really beautifully with those other colors. So that would be a really pretty table runner. Remember that this process, you're just making blocks. You can create table runners, you can create wall hangings, whatever you'd like. And this is one other bright flower that came in. I think these are, I'm not sure, maybe sort of like a pansy. Just real pretty. This comes in the blue and yellow, and then there are some blenders with it. It also comes in a pink and green colorway as well. Very pretty for spring. Those of you who are with us playing with purses, wouldn't this just be a really pretty spring purse? And last but not least on fabric, these sweet little llamas with the navy background and some coordinates, and the little llamas as well, the pink, and then florals that go with it. What a cute little baby quilt that would make also. We did get some yoga fabric in. I showed that the other day. That's been real popular for tote bags as well, but a fun relaxation quilt for somebody also. The other thing that I want to talk about, we talked about leftover quilt blocks. Those of you who are embroiderers may also have leftover embroidery blocks. These blocks again have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I can put them into my project as long as I know I'm not going to wrap that edge and cover. So move that 1/4 inch seam allowance back a little bit so that when you wrap that edge, it covers the raw edge, but it doesn't cover your design. I'm going to, as I mentioned, talk about T-shirts, but I'm going to do that in just a minute. I want to just share, again, a little inspiration on what you can do with Quilt As You Go. If you're nervous about creating, if you're nervous about creating your own project, Quilt As You Go, you've seen the process but you don't know where to start, you can also use patterns that are already printed and made. This is one called Plaid. And if you look at this quilt, I'll hold this up here, the dark coffee bean fabric is the sashing. And I could do this Quilt As You Go. I would make these blocks right here, and the coffee bean would actually be the black wrapping to the front. So although this quilt was designed as a regular sew your pieces together, have your top, and then long arm quilt it or take it to your sewing machine, I could do each one of these blocks, Quilt As You Go, by having the back wrapped to the front to create the sashing. So this is AOK's Plaid pattern. Works great as a way to do Quilt As You Go. So you can look at patterns and determine whether you could do it as Quilt As You Go. I'm going to hold this one up. This is a test. This one is called Baby Checkers. Guess what? How would you do this quilt as you go? You would make this square, and you would make your back the burgundy, and the sashing would come to the front. Okay? So that would be a real simple quilt to turn into a Quilt As You Go project. And that was called Baby Checkers. I pulled a couple of our other patterns. I'm going to just kind of flash them by you for a second, and some AOKs. These are all also on the website in that window shopping category. But these are all projects that have some type of a sashing coming to the front. And this one is called Farmhouse. And you can see that there is a sashing around each of the blocks. This one, wide sashing. You have to think a little bit about where it's going to be. This is placemats and runners. Absolutely no reason you couldn't do that as Quilt As You Go. Root beer, that brown sashing around every block, that could be your back wrapping forward. The only thing you have to pay attention to is your cutting instructions won't always be exactly the same. You have to think about seam allowance, because you're going to have that half-inch wrap all the way around covering the edge of your blocks. This is viewed downstairs, those little window panes. Each of those, there's a sash that runs between them. That could be your sashing. And this one, real easy to see, called lattice. What you see as the white grid on here, that would be your back wrapping to your front. So lots of ways you can take a regular quilting pattern and turn it into Quilt As You Go. All right, I know many of you have been hanging around just waiting to see the t-shirts. So this is a really nice, easy way to make a t-shirt quilt. This is a t-shirt. You need to still put stabilizer on the back, Pella 911, Shape Flex, something to stabilize that t-shirt. And then I also have already attached my fusible batting to this t-shirt. This is one big block, and I picked this flame fabric to be my back. So I'm going to take my t-shirt and I'm going to center it on my backing fabric, and I'm going to have that 1-inch edge all the way around, and I'm going to do some quilting to hold this together, and this is my block ready to go. So this is a way to make a single t-shirt into one big block. But a lot of times you might have t-shirts that have small pieces. This was on a sleeve. This one is just a scrap. And why did I have that in here? Because a lot of times when you're doing t-shirt quilts, I need a little bit of that orange to go next to something. All the rest of the t-shirt, the front of the t-shirt, all of this fabric, as long as you put your stabilizer on it, these can make blocks as well and fill in spaces. So don't throw away the t-shirt that doesn't have the printing on it. So this one again, this you can throw away. The neck, yeah, there's not much I'm going to do with that. But so on this t-shirt, this was the piece from the front. It has my fusible interfacing on the back to stabilize the t-shirt. This was the piece from the sleeve. So I can take my ruler and cut out whether I want a long strip with that number on it or a square. I can cut out that shape to be any shape I want. And again, I can take my batting piece, and I'm going to take my t-shirt piece, and then I can take my other t-shirt piece, and I can create this block however I want. I can fill in this other space with, for instance, this is racing fabric, so I might want to take some of that fabric that had the spark plug or the tire tracks. I can mix the t-shirt with cotton fabric, and I can create my blocks for my t-shirt quilt. So I might have many blocks like this that are multiple pieces and parts, and I might have some like this where the whole block is one t-shirt. So it's a fun, easy way to create a t-shirt quilt without having to worry about every t-shirt being the same size or the same shape. So a fun way to do that. The other thing I want to just mention is, you know I like my bias tape. This is this flame fabric. Used a bias tape maker and just created a piece of, this is just fabric where the edges are turned over. So I've got two finished edges here. This is a great way if I am going to take fabric here, and I'm going to grab something here that is going to look really wild and crazy with this one. Give me just one second. So say this becomes my block, and I have this piece here, and I have this piece here, and I have raw edges. I can just take this bias tape and put it right over the edge and sew both sides. That will cover my raw edges, so I can actually just butt two pieces of fabric together and cover it with a piece of bias tape rather than putting it right sides together, sewing and flipping. So an easy way, fun way to do a t-shirt quilt where it doesn't look like every other t-shirt quilt where you've got 3 squares across and 4 squares down. And you can also adjust them to be, you can make the blocks as big as you need for the size of the t-shirt squares that you have. And I think that's about it. A fun way to work on projects. Those of you who haven't seen the intro to Quilt As You Go, it's on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thesewingbasket. If you would like and subscribe that channel, we sure appreciate it. Also, it really helps us if you comment on our videos. It helps us get more visibility. And we like to know your feedback. If you'd put in the comment section what your favorite tip was, if you've got questions, what you liked about the video or learned during the video, always very helpful to us. We appreciate your watching, and thanks so much for being with us today.